You ever catch yourself reading between the lines of every text someone sends? Like they say okay, and your brain writes a whole novel about what that actually means. Or maybe you're that friend who can't just enjoy a conversation. You're busy decoding tone, eye movement, and why they blink twice before answering. Trust me, it's not just you. I do it too. I'll be talking to someone and halfway through, my brain's already dissecting their childhood trauma instead of just listening. Psychology becomes both a gift and a curse. Because once you learn how to see patterns, you can't unsee them. And that's what we're diving into today. The psychology of people who psychoanalyze everything. The people who can't turn their mind off, even when it hurts them. Let's start with what really drives that overanalysis. Behind every overanalyzing mind, there's a memory. Not of learning, but of flinching. Someone once said, "You can trust me," and proved why you shouldn't. Since then, the brain stopped believing words and started studying patterns. It's not that these people hate trusting others. They just stopped gambling on promises. Psychologists call it inconsistent attachment, when early experiences teach the mind that safety can disappear without warning. So instead of feeling connection, the brain scans for warning signs. Smiles get questioned, motives get tested, kindness gets dissected until it bleeds doubt. It looks like emotional intelligence from the outside, reading people, catching lies, staying one step ahead. But underneath, it's exhaustion, because when trust dies, peace goes with it. Everything becomes a potential threat wrapped in politeness. Compliments sound like traps. Apologies sound like strategy. And the bitter truth? People who can't trust often become the most misunderstood. They want closeness, but they test it until it breaks. They crave safety, but fear it the moment it appears. So they analyze instead of connect, because control feels safer than faith. The ones who read everyone the best often understand themselves the least. They can dissect a stranger's motives in seconds but go blank when asked, "So, how do you feel?" That's not awareness. That's avoidance with a diploma. Psychologists call it projection of analysis. The mind turns its gaze outward to dodge what's uncomfortable inside. It's easier to study someone else's wounds than to face your own reflection. So instead of healing, it intellectualizes. Instead of feeling, it explains. And that's how pain hides behind wisdom. This habit feels noble, being the observer, the one who sees through illusions, but deep down, it's a distraction. By analyzing everyone else's chaos, they get to ignore their own. And when people start to notice the cracks, they call it mystery or depth, when in reality, it's emotional distance disguised as insight. It's the quiet hypocrisy of the analyzer, fluent in human psychology, but tone-deaf to their own loneliness. The more they read others, the less they recognize themselves. At first, psychoanalyzing people feels like a superpower. You can predict moods, decode lies, sense attraction, smell insecurity before they even open their mouth. You watch others stumble through emotions you already dissected years ago. And deep down, a quiet voice whispers, "You're smarter than them." That's where it turns dangerous. Because the moment you start thinking you understand the human mind better than others, you stop being human yourself. You start observing emotions instead of feeling them. You start diagnosing instead of empathizing. You stop connecting and start calculating. Psychologists call this cognitive arrogance. When knowledge creates emotional distance, the more you know, the less you relate. You stop experiencing life organically because you're too busy labeling it. Anger becomes projected insecurity. Love becomes attachment response. Sadness becomes dopamine withdrawal. You strip life of its poetry and turn it into a psychological spreadsheet. It's control. That's what you're really addicted to. You're not trying to understand people to love them. You're trying to understand them so they can't hurt you. You learned early that emotions make you vulnerable. You call it awareness. But what you really crave is safety. Because if you can explain everyone's behavior, maybe nothing can surprise you. If you can predict pain, maybe you can prevent it. But that's the God complex, thinking that understanding people gives you control over chaos. It doesn't. It just turns your mind into a prison made of theories. You'll spend years interpreting everyone else's trauma while never facing your own. You'll study patterns until they all look the same, predictable, empty, safe. And one day you'll realize you haven't lived in years. You've just been observing, diagnosing, explaining. And here's the tragic twist. People like this don't fear being misunderstood. They fear being seen. Because when someone finally looks back and psychoanalyzes you, You can't hide behind intellect anymore. The one who understands everyone ends up being understood by no one. Funny thing about this whole topic, most people will agree with everything we just said and then scroll straight back into the same mess they just escaped. But you're not most people, right? If you actually made it this far, congrats. Your attention span just beat 99% of the internet. Now prove it. Hit subscribe so your brain keeps getting this kind of psychological warfare. And in the comments, drop your viewpoint or a question that messed with your mind the most from this video. I read them all and personally reply. If this made you think of someone who really needs to hear it, send it to them quietly. No captions, no explanations. Let them wonder why you did. You've just listened to Psyqis, where thoughts hit harder than advice ever could.